everybody. Welcome back to No Code North, our Friday events here in the Gather space, our fabulous lodge, which you will perhaps see behind me. I am Penny Olorenshaw, one of the co-founders of No Code North. Jeremy LaRue is running the stream in the background, and Maggie Monceau is here with us as well. And we are excited that today another Canadian, yay, is joining us, Aron Korenblit, who is currently with Gumloop. But we've been watching Aron's progression through various companies the last few years. Got to know him early in the pandemic through his Airtable streams, where he was teaching us all how to learn Airtable and make it do the things we needed to do. Then he moved on to Webflow, and now he's gone to Gumloop. So I'm going to introduce Aron, and we're going to have a little chat here to start with, and then we'll go right into a workshop where he's going to show us how to automate stuff. So welcome, Aron.
Thank you. It's a rite of passage for me. Every new job I come here and I chat about it. So I'm excited to be back.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you here. So you joined Gumloop fairly recently, and I think you sort of had found it, was kind of digging around. What was your whole reason to, sort of step from Webflow into Gumloop?
No. So actually, funny enough, I discovered Gumloop at Webflow. So at Webflow, we had a peculiar challenge that I had to manage, which was folks like you are very active on social media, and you do two things. You either love Webflow or want to tell us something. And so we get thousands of notifications every day across Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn. And Emily, who you all know and love, was like, hey, why aren't we responding to these people? And I'm like, well, we have 2,000 to 3,000 messages a day, right? It's hard to. So actually, someone had mentioned Gumloop, and I had built, to my own surprise, frankly, was this ability to take every single social media post, have AI read it or analyze it, and be like, does a human need to intervene here? Is this important to the community team? And I thought that was such a fantastic thing to build.
Yeah.
Literally went from my job to 2% of my job. And it was really great to know that folks who needed help, who needed support, actually got it, right? And we did that through AI. So Gumloop was what we used. And I was just kind of so enamored by the company and started working with them, and was like, yeah, this feels like a good next step for me. Right. And here we are 3 months later. I've been here for actually under 3 months, I think now. Officially January, February, March, April, 3.5 months. So it felt like the right time to come on and tell me whether I made the right decision or not. You guys can judge.
You seem happy, so I think that's always a good sign.
For sure.
So tell us a little bit more about Gumloop, what it does, why we might want to consider using it.
Yeah.
And how is it different from, there's so many other AI-based tools coming out now. What is it about Gumloop that makes it something we pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the way I think about it is Gumloop is that ability to think of a workflow, right? So you just kind of think of it and you can go out and build it, and there's no barriers to how types of things you can do. So most automation tools work on this if this then that model, right? So trigger happens and then a few things. So you're pushing data from one place to another, right? Which has always made sense, right? You have something happen in Slack and then you want that thing to be in whatever, right? A sheet, Google Sheet, right? With AI, the world has kind of changed, right? Now there's value to being hey, read this whole table, right? Give me a report, write me a newsletter, right? And when you think about it, there's still structure to those workflows. You still want to do okay, I want you to go to this Google Sheet. I want you to take every single record, and then I want AI to do something with that information and then do something else, right? A good example for you all, and I'm happy to show it in a minute, is one challenge that I face, and I always using my own examples, is I release a new lesson on Gumloop University, which you should all check out, by the way. And then my question is, where in Gumloop, the website, should I reference that lesson? Right? We're talking about 100 to 200 pages potentially of our documentation, of our blog, of our landing pages. And the question I'm asking myself is like, where should I put this? Now, me as a human, I'm never going to read all 200 pages. Like I can remember,
Right.
you all know I'm not that smart, right? I'm not like the thing we did 2 weeks ago is like, it's gone, right? So I could actually really easily build a workflow that says, hey, go to my sitemap, take every single URL, go read those URLs, read the page I just created, and answer the question, where should I link this? Right.
Wow.
So the thing there is that when you think about it, like me as a marketer, I can explain that workflow. Right.
Right.
But I kind of need AI to be plugged in. And I also kind of need this idea of lists, right?
Right.
Which more technically is kind of what's different with Gumloop. Like obviously, there's a more high level marketing of like Gumloop is the automation tool of of like this new era that we're in. But more concretely, what that means is it doesn't operate in the if this then that framework, and it thinks like a developer, but you don't need to be a developer, and you can use AI throughout.
Right. So just in that particular example, does it need to read all that stuff every time, or does it store that information so that then it can kind of go back and just refer to what it's already learned?
So see, Penny, you're like one step ahead, right? So like the way I built it, because I'm lazy, is like just do everything every time, right? But then you could do things like, oh well, a good example I can show you as well is I have it up. Is we had someone who was like, hey, like I want to create a newsletter about every single Y Combinator launch, right? So like they have a forum. We can go out to that forum and say, okay, read, every single post, tell pull the information from the page, and then write a newsletter that's like super beautiful, right? But we need a store. Like we need to check whether we've already sent out that example. So you can then add more functionality. Like I know the use cases I've been sharing so far are kind of website based, but it's really horizontal, right? So you folks
Right.
do things like I use social media monitoring. You can do things like lead enrichment, lead analysis, reporting. Um, we had one example that's very popular that we use as showcase as well is like go read, look at a competitor's Facebook ads, have AI analyze them and write you a report. Right, you can do that type of stuff in Gumloop
Right.
relatively easily. So it's a very horizontal tool, similar to like a lot of automation tool. It gives you the building blocks, and then you can go out and automate your workflows.
Right. Cool. All right. So enough chatting. I think we need to start seeing what it looks like and how it works. So
Yeah. So as I
we-
go through, like I'd love to, I'll show you two built out examples that may feel a little. I don't want to use the word daunting, but like they're built out. But I'll go step by step, telling you what each step does, and I'll show you an example.
Okay.
How does that?
All right.
I'll show you that
That
first. Does
sounds
the
great.
first one sound like a good one to start with?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be cool to see
Cool.
how that works. So
Okay, cool.
can
So let
share
me.
your screen.
Yeah, we're gonna do that awkward thing. I'm gonna share my screen. It's gonna.
I'm gonna have Inception for a moment.
There we
And
go.
then,
Okay,
oh,
cool.
look at that.
There
Nicely
we
done.
go. Okay, so this one's already built out, right? So what this does, I'll just kind of walk you through. So this gets the HTML of the page, right? Let me actually just run it, and then we can like look at the inputs and outputs as it runs.
Okay.
It takes a couple minutes, but so essentially in Gumloop, you have a canvas where you add in nodes.
Okay.
So you can do things like inputs, outputs, and then AI steps and all that good stuff. So in this one, I'll go step by step. So this retrieves, like we can see the output is just the HTML.
Okay.
And then we're going to have an AI step, right, that extracts all the URLs,
Okay.
right? And obviously my flow failed for some reason. I'll figure that out later. I'll show you another one that worked. And then, so this is going to output all of our links. Oh, obviously this one failed. Let me check why it failed. Okay, well, no value output for. Okay, I'll figure that out. And then it's going to go ahead and extract all the URLs and then filter the ones that we want to look at. Like it filters all of the university, all of the docs content.
So you give it, you give it some parameters to filter by.
Yeah, exactly. So here I'm filtering by, does it contain the URL lesson, right?
Yep.
And then this one's probably way too complex to start with. I'm realizing I should have done something simpler.
It's cool though.
Yeah, it's definitely the more advanced. I wish it worked, right?
Yeah, well.
I'll show you the other one that's a little cooler. And then it looks at docs, right? And then has an AI step that compares and says, okay, look at all the docs.
Right.
Look at all of the university pages and write me a report of what I need to link to.
Okay.
Right. So and then it sends it to me as an email. So let me go pull up the last time that I ran this, which was the last time I did a lesson, which was last week. So let me just pull this up. Cross-linking opportunity. Cross-linking opportunity. Here we go. And this is what it generated. Right. So it took the doc links and the university links that I just provided and said, here is where you should link it and why it thinks you should link it there.
Okay.
Right. So this is all run with, I can run this every time.
Right.
I can just click run and then have it run. Obviously, I'd have to fix it a little bit. And then it'll generate that report. Now, that's like one example of what you can do with Gumloop. Let's go into this more, and then I'll build one out with you together, example together. So here's one that what it does, it scrapes, goes to this launches page, right? And then grabs the latest YC launches, writes them to a Google Sheet, like right here.
Okay.
And, does a bunch of research, like extracts who the founders are. Obviously, my lights turned off. One second. The lights are on a timer and tell me when I've talked too much. Extracts company name, company domain, company description, pulls all of that back together, and then formats this really beautiful email with AI, pulling all of that information, giving it styling, and then sends that off. Let me show you an example. I think I had one. Let me pull this out. New YC launches. So I just ran it right before we started. Here we go. And these are the two that were launched today. Okay. So all of this, automated, you can get this in your inbox every morning and it's all kind of generated with AI. I think Gumloop, you hear a lot about AI agents and things like that. And we do have some agentic nodes. But Gumloop is a very structured approach to workflows, right? So you're building it node by node, and you can understand what it's doing at each step.
Right. As opposed to letting the AI sort of decide what it should do.
Yeah, exactly. So there are some AI type steps, right? And we can do a few examples as I go through the example I have ready for you guys.
Yep.
But even for those, like you see what's in, you control the prompt, and you see what comes out.
Right. Right. Okay.
Cool?
Yeah, very cool.
Okay.
Very cool.
So I'll give you guys an example. This is the one I use for, let me go into company conference information right here. So let's imagine I'm running a conference, right?
Okay.
And my goal is to, let me zoom in here. These are my attendees. It's a very small conference, but very exclusive. And I have these talks. Okay. And my goal is to, for each attendee, use AI to recommend the perfect talks. So I want to,
on what we know about who they are or their company or.
Yes. So we're going to go out to the web. We're going to do some research about Max. We're going to go grab Max's work experience. And then we're going to ask AI, based on what Max, Reed, Brian do, right? Can we recommend the right talks?
Okay.
And then draft the email with those talks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So it'll look a little bit like this, but we'll build it kind of step by step. So this is where, if you have questions, go ahead. So first step, I'm going to use the input node. right? So this is my starting point. Now you can use a starting point, things like Google Sheets, Airtable, right? But we're going to use an input node, and you'll see why in about 10 minutes. And I'm going to go a little quickly. Stop me if there are any questions throughout. So nodes are the kind of building blocks of Gumloop. So I'm going to use as default max.gumloop.com. This is the kind of first value I have right here.
Yep.
Now, nodes are what I wanted to do. If I was to like draw what this does, I really like TL Draw, by the way. This is my new favorite tool, apart from Gumloop. Let me go into Gumloop 101. And then let me go into flow over or flow basics. So our goal is to get the email address where we have that, right?
Yep.
Get work experience, recommend talks with AI, and then draft the email.
Okay.
So this is what our flow is going to look like in Gumloop as well. So I have the email address. Let's go get work experience. So I'm going to go, that's going to be a node. I'm going to enrich the contact. So enrich contact information. Now in Gumloop, passing information from one node to a next is a two-step process. I connect. Yep. Right now, that information becomes available here on the right, and I could put it into the node. So what do we want as input? We have email address.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So then I drag and drop. So now Max goes here. And then you'll notice in Gumloop, like the providers, those are provided by us. Like you don't need authentication to Apollo, Proxy Curl, all this other stuff. Like you are using our relationships with those providers.
So essentially, Gumloop has set up these little nodes.
It's set up the nodes, but also like once we'll get to the Ask AI step, you'll notice we like you don't like these are providers that go and enrich contact information. Yep. Some tools ask you to use your own, right? So go and have a relationship with Apollo, with a Proxy Curl, with Hunter. We do that for you, and that's basically across most of our nodes. So maybe I want to grab their first name that's in the email, and then maybe I want to grab their LinkedIn URL, right? So let's run that. So running just means executing every node in the flow. Yep. Right. So now I have the kind of first name and LinkedIn URL. Now what I can do is, okay, now that I have LinkedIn, what can I do with LinkedIn?
Right.
I can do the profile scraper. I can go and grab information about Max, and I want to grab work experiences.
Okay.
Right, so let's run that. And now I should have first name, work experiences. There we go. And okay, so now I have what Max has done. I have the work experience. I have my talks. I can have AI say, well, which one of these talks would we recommend to Max? Okay, I'm going to go to, so right here in our nodes, we have all of these in core nodes, all of the different ways you can use AI. So in my case, I'm going to do like a generic prompt, right? I'm going to say like, hey, given this experience, recommend these talks. Here are the talks. But you can also use it in a more narrow and defined way. So let's say you have a website and you want to scrape the website and extract what the company does. You can do extract data. If you want to categorize social media posts as urgent or praise or product feedback, you can use a categorizer step. You can generate images, right? So let's say you have a list of talks and you want to, actually, that'd be a really good one. Now that I think about it, I should have a step here that is take the talk title and generate an AI image. I'll keep that one in mind. So let's just use Ask AI. So I'm going to input the work experiences. So I'm going to say, okay, and this is a pro tip that I personally learned while working at Gumloop. I do not write prompts. I have AI write prompts for me. So I'm going to open up ChatGPT and say, write me a prompt that takes as input a list of talks and a person's work experience and outputs a bullet list of talks.
That's very meta.
It is very meta, but I will be honest, like it is so much better. Yes.
Yeah. Because Yeah, it can be easier to describe what it is you want than to try to formulate the prompt in a way that will work.
Yeah. So here's a good example, right? So you didn't see it; it was off to the side. I did in
Okay.
ChatGPT.
hmm
But so you are a helpful assistant that generates a concise bullet list of relevant talks for professional profile, inputs a list of talks, a summary of the person's work experience, task. It's like I would never write this,
No.
right? Example input. So we're not gonna have the example input, work experience, output. There we go. Okay, and see, here's a good example. Like I have let me bring up the Google Doc, which has the email we want to send. I had like a template conference email, right? So this is what we need, right? So given your background, I thought the following talks would be relevant to you. In here, I don't want to include the thinking process,
Right.
right? So in here in the prompt that it gave me, it said, oh, like provide some like explanation. So I'm gonna go back to ChatGPT and say, do not provide explanation in the
Right.
prompt. And yeah, so that's actually just a general tip, is that it's much easier to go to an AI to help you write the prompt, especially in these like recurring workflows
hmm
where you want the prompt to be really good because you're going to be running this 200-300 times, right? So here we go. Here, so it gave me like another one, format, and then it provided a little, perfect. So now we need to provide the work experience and the talks, right?
Okay.
So now in Gumloop, we can just in here in the prompt say, okay, the talks to pick from. Now I'm going to copy paste these just for now, and then we'll make this dynamic. Let me actually, yeah. Let's format this correctly, and then we'll bring these in dynamically in about 5 minutes. Once, okay, there we go. Now this is also something I should have asked AI to do, add these little spaces. Da-da-da. Boom. See, copy pasting is never good.
No.
It's always a hassle. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to give the work experience. Now the work experience comes from the previous step, so I can just bring this in.
Ah, okay.
So I'm bringing in the work experience. So now this prompt has the prompt, it has the different talks, and then dynamically brings in the work experience.
Okay.
Now I can pick which model I want this to run on. So we have OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Perplexity, Meta, DeepSeek, Grok 3. So let's just use GPT 4.1. Let's run this. So what's it doing? It's taking the input, enriching the contact, and then we see the response from the AI are these 3 talks.
Okay.
And then, if we were to change who we're putting in here, and we'll make it tied to the sheet in just a moment, now I can draft an email. So I'm going to go to Gmail. I'm going to put the sender node in. I'm going to connect. So our body, that's going to be, let me copy paste this right here, right? So, okay, hi, first name. First name comes
Our
from,
first name,
yeah,
right?
we got it right here. So we're going to connect that. So I'm bringing in first name.
Yeah.
We're so excited to welcome you. Here are the relevant talks. Right, relevant talks are the response from the AI.
Yeah.
There we go. And now we've drafted this. Oh, I forgot, who's the recipient? The recipient is Max. We're going to connect that. So it's almost like you're playing Legos a little bit. So so 3 talks we would recommend. I'm going to send this as a draft, and I can resume, right? So I don't need to run the whole pipeline. I can just run from a previous step. This is going to rerun the AI step, and now I have that draft in my inbox. Let me go bring that up for you. Question, anyone?
No. Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
That is one of the differences. I think the other is the way like so far we haven't been touching lists. So
Mhm.
that's actually, Jeremy, what I'm about to jump into next. So far this has been like we take the text input and then we kind of just have a text output, right? So this is very in line with like the general way of working with automation that we've known and loved, except
Right.
as you said, like that ability to not have to have relationships with different model providers, like all of that is included in Gumloop. You're kind of working with our, I don't want to use the word credentials, but like our relationships if you want. If you have your own keys, you can use those too. Um, but I think let me jump into like one of the big differentiators in my mind of Gumloop is that Gumloop was built by developers, and so in some instances, it thinks like a developer and makes things much, much easier, right?
Mhm.
So let's imagine that I want to connect this to every attendee, right? So there's a world in which I have 400, 500, 1,000 attendees.
Right.
Now, I don't want to click run, like, it's kind of weird to like copy, click run, go to my Gmail, send the email, right?
Mhm.
What I want is to reuse this flow for every attendee.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's call this, now I did this in like my template, which I shouldn't have done, but let's call this get recommendations no code north. So I want to run this for each
Right.
row in my sheet. I'm using my words very carefully here, for each. So I'm going to create a new flow. I'm going to call this get attendee sheet, right? So let's imagine, first thing I need to get this information. So I'm going to add a sheets node. I'm going to pick my conference.
Right.
Here we go. So I'm reading my attendees. I'm going to run that just to show you what the output is. So we have our output, right? So we have our list of emails.
Okay.
So now I want to pass this list to run this for each email in my list.
Right.
So if you are like a developer, you would think of the word function, right? Like I want to use this function for this list.
Right.
So in Gumloop, if you want to kind of use one of your flows, this is why it's in this kind of workbook. Like every flow has multiple, every workbook can have multiple flows. You can go to the subflows and say, okay, so now this is a node that does this.
Right.
So you'll notice the input, I can connect my sheet and pass in the email list.
Right.
So this is saying run this for every item, for every email in my email list.
Right.
So now it's going to go and say, okay, well, I'm going to replace this input with read. Then I'm going to replace the input with Brian. Then I'm going to replace the input with Drew and run this. So you can almost imagine this like being a little node
Mhm.
that does all of these steps.
Right. It's like a little for loop
It
within
is
your overall script, right?
exactly. And that
Right.
for loop does all these steps every time you pass an input.
Right.
So now if I run this, you'll notice it's going to run 4 times, right? So see, it's running in parallel once
cool.
for each person. So it's not like, okay, let me run one, then run the other. Now, if I go into my inbox, which I had up here, let me refresh here. You'll notice I have 4 more drafts. right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you could scale this to 100, 200. And so this ability to run on lists and have these functions is allows you to create much more complex flows without creating like, those images that we see with like 400 nodes and it's super complex. And
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But so that's one way. I think another way, now that we have some time and I'm happy to like dig in, is that you can also go from a list to text. So a good example is you'll notice here in my Ask AI, I copy pasted the talks, right? Now, what you would expect as a marketing person is like the person adding new talks is not going to remember to like go into Gumloop and update this Ask AI node.
Right.
Well, what we would want is to read all of these talks on the fly when we recommend talks. So we can do something similar to what we did before was, hey, let's go ahead and read Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Or integrations. Let's put a reader node. I'm going to put it over here. Let's go back to our conference. Right. Let's read talks. So I'm going to run the whole thing just because I'm lazy. It's going to go ahead and read the talks. Now, your instinct, I'm sure, Penny, is going to be like, oh, well, let me connect this and this. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But the problem is that this is a list. Right? So we don't want this to run. So if I was to be like, okay, instead of all this text.
Right. Just put this list in. Right.
Yeah, just like, oh, put the list in. Like we want the talk track. Right?
Right.
No, we want the talk title.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a problem because now it's going to loop over every talk in the list, but then work experience is only there once. This is called a list mismatch.
Okay.
Right? So we need to, so if I go back to what it was before, right? Remember that this was just a big blob of text.
Mm-hmm.
We need to turn this list into a big blob of text.
Right.
So to do that, let me just turn the lights back. We need to take this list and use join list items. So it's going to take that list, and we're working to make this simpler and more intuitive. So this is going to take that list. If I just resume from here, it's going to take the list and turn it into a big blob of text. I call this smushing. So the output of Google Sheets is a list of talks.
Right.
And then it takes a list. And then if I look at the output of join list items, it's just one big blob of text. It's smushed them together.
Right.
So now I can do boom. And then talks to pick from right here. I'm going to pass in that smush text.
Okay.
And now my talks are dynamic.
Right.
Right. Now, there's a world in which I could have a subflow that is get talks. And then the input to this subflow is like the talks, the person, and then we pass that over to the recommendation, right? So you can kind of build these modular pieces of your workflow that are reusable within your workflow and reusable across your workspace. So whenever you build a flow, if I go to subflows, you go all flows, you can pick from anything you've ever built in Gumloop.
Oh, cool.
Right, across your workspace.
Yep.
So larger customers will have a bunch of little pieces like enrich lead, get conversations, all that stuff that you can repurpose across your workflows.
Right.
Yeah. And then we could save, and then we could run this. Now we're getting the talks dynamically. So that means that any talks that we add here, we'll
get
no code north talking about AI. Now, if we run, just resume from here. And now it's just going to do this branch. We can see no code north talking about AI.
Right.
And it's like it's now available anytime we run this flow.
Right. And that's great.
Yeah, last thing I'll show you is that you can also turn it on as a trigger. So to say, oh, I just want to run this every time an attendee is added to the list.
Ah,
You can
okay.
just do that kind of framework as well. So you can turn that on and just have your emails be sent out automatically. Like I would also probably recommend, turning the draft as no. So it's just
Right.
sending them out, just like you would
Right.
on like an if this then that framework.
Right.
So we're kind of trying to do best of both worlds.
Right. So essentially, when somebody then signs up, gets added to that list, they would then automatically get
Yes.
a list of the talk that would be most relevant to them.
Yes.
That's cool. A little,
Yeah.
It's a little docky, but it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a big difference. I think you can think
Yeah.
of like product onboarding. You can imagine a world in which, you can even qualify or disqualify leads, right? So let's say someone comes. So a good example, actually, for maybe I'll end here and I'll kind of go back into the talk mode. Like a good example is someone signs up to be a Webflow to your agency.
Okay.
Right? You can do a flow that checks what framework their site is currently on. Right? And be like, is it WordPress? Is it Webflow? So you can have a flow that takes their email, looks at the domain, goes out to that website, checks what provider they're using, and based on what provider they're using, routes it to a different place in your organization. Right? You could do, and lead enrichment or this type of lead routing is just one example of the kind of very many things you can do on Gumloop.
Right.
Have I sold you on it? Are we good?
Well, yeah, I think I definitely want to check it out. I've been in the midst of, putting together ideas for a potential client, and it's like, oh, this is something we could perhaps use. I've been talking to him about, trying to, because he's got a number of different services. It's like, well, if they've had this service, how about recommending this other service? And then I could sort of see where that might.
Yep. Yeah.
use
So a lot
it
of our
like that.
workflows, a lot of the workflows that are successful on Gumloop is whenever you have the requirement to go into your internal tooling or kind of go out to the web to search, or even like some examples might be, hey, I have a sales team of 10, 15 people, and every morning I want them to have an email that summarizes all the conversations we've had with that customer from the CRM. Whenever you have that, like take all conversations, smush them together, and have AI write a summary, a like beautiful email that says, hey, this is like the latest with this customer, right? Or hey, like go out to their website, get the latest news about that customer, come back with like a one pager that tells you everything you need to know about that upcoming conversation from internal and external services. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with Gumloop.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised by like what other people built, which is a great part of this job for me. Is I'm not that smart, and people build way cooler stuff than I will ever build on Gumloop. So,
Right, cool. Now, how many users does Gumloop have right now, and how quickly is it growing?
it's growing very, very quickly. So whatever number I would tell you would be kind of irrelevant a week from now.
Really?
So we're seeing a lot of growth in businesses mainly, obviously, and those types of more complex. I wouldn't use the word complex, but more involved. Like simple workflows are great on Gumloop, but really where the magic shines through, I always say, is when you're using AI in like a relevant way, whether that's tagging, categorizing, summarizing, and when you are kind of querying internal or external services, right? So like go out to the web and find this information for me and come back. Or hey, go to my CRM, go to my templates, go to my documentation, right? And return a response that speeds up my workflows and my ability for my team to, execute on something. Like, hey, a good example is like, hey, someone thinks that we need to update our documentation. Before, that would mean like someone going and checking the documentation and trying to figure out where this makes sense. You can now do a first pass that says, hey, based on what this person wants, AI, go read the documentation, go to my website, read it, tell me if it makes sense. And if it does make sense, tell me like a draft of what I should write based on our tone and voice of our documents, right? So that kind of says, instead of that person doing that work, they're
Mhm.
more of an approver of work.
Right. Making sure that it is correct and that it is sounding like it comes from you guys as opposed to the machine.
Yeah. But the machine can be
Right.
like, hey, that's already there. It's just in a different place in the page.
Ah,
Right. So
right.
that's where you should start thinking of, like, whenever you have these people doing either repetitive tasks, but that we just didn't imagine being able to automate. That's the type of
Right.
stuff you can now do with Gumloop really easily. Like that. In I come back to the example I started with, is, I couldn't read 3,000 2,000, like the thousands of messages Webflow, and 99% of them are fine. I don't need to read them, right? Like, they're great. There are people being like, we love Webflow, right? It was like, we just needed that 1, 2, 3 a day that are like needles in a haystack, where someone's like, hey, I can't log in, or hey, I'm facing this issue, and I need it resolved, or hey, someone's angry at me on the web. Before I
Mhm.
couldn't sleep because maybe someone was angry at me at the web on me. But now I had the confidence that AI will at least be able to identify it, so
Right.
that someone can kind of jump in.
Right.
Well, the person who would
Right.
jump in was often me in the community team. So
Right. Yeah. But it's essentially you were able to triage
Mhm.
a bunch of things that would have been almost impossible to work through otherwise.
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Cool. All right. It's a real place. I wasn't sure whether you had a background, but there's actually something
No.
walking behind you.
Yeah, this is our office. That's people are slowly trickling in. I'm the only person who arrives early. I'm the early bird of the bunch.
Right. That's right. You are in San Francisco. It's a lot earlier
Yep.
there. Right.
Yep.
Yes. I see that Pixelita has joined us from a much warmer place than where we are.
I'm actually in Porto right now.
Okay.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very
and
nice.
It's pouring rain, so happened to catch you guys, and glad I did.
Excellent. Good. Do you have any questions about Gumloop from what you've seen? Or I don't know. I noticed you popped in, but I'm not sure how long you've
I
been
just
here.
popped in, but to me it sounds like something like an N8 or what is it, Lindy, and it works with MCPs to connect everything together with AI if needed and automations, correct?
Directionally correct. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's Gumloop, so it's
But now I know there's possibilities, so
For
yeah,
sure.
exactly.
now I know where to
Exactly.
turn.
I actually have a question about that process that you were just showing us. Sending out through Gmail may or may not be a good idea if you were sending out several hundred
sure.
of those. Can you then, connect it to an actual email marketing service? So you've got the whitelisted servers and all that
for sure.
stuff.
For sure. Yeah, like we have a lot of connections. So yes. Yeah, you can send it to whatever tool you want, whether that's, and I won't have time today, but if Gumloop doesn't have a connection, we have a whole custom node builder where it can execute code. So just like I know it's a big Webflow crowd, so just like the embed HTML, right? Or, embed code into your site, you have a similar kind of node in Gumloop. The difference being is that AI will help you write the code. So you can just write what you want, like connect to MailChimp, and you'll be like, okay, like it'll just write the code for you to be able to do that. Actually, when I was at Webflow before joining Gumloop, I wrote most of those connections to the Twitter and Reddit and all of those via the custom code node, or custom code builder, or custom node builder, I should say. So it is, as a non-developer, it is quite shocking how good AI has become at writing very simple code. As I'm sure you all know with GSAP, right? I'm sure your ChatGPT is generating 95% of your GSAP. When I was at Webflow, it was also generating 100% of my GSAP code, the very little that I wrote. Arguably, I think it wrote 100% of my code. I think a few times even on stream, I was like, "Oh no, it's not working. Let me ChatGPT this." And so yeah, so you have that ability, and we'll be going more into that ability to generate code on the fly,
Right.
because the AI is so good.
Right. So that actually does bring up a question. Does anybody else have a question at this point? Um, y-
Yeah, great question. I think, yeah, really good. You know, we're amongst friends here. What I would say is like I have learned so much in the last 3 months, uh, and every day I work here and work with people who are much more quote unquote AI native than I am. I am shocked by what you can do. Right. What I mean by that is I think there's a skill that needs to be developed in the next couple of years for all of us, is how to leverage these things. A few examples that have an AI write a prompt drastically improved my ability to use AI.
right.
Now, to your question specifically, um, that is a skill and a muscle to develop. So, more particularly to Gumloop, one is like, okay, what is the prompt? How do we improve the prompt? Then, I think a lot of the challenges with AI agents is the lack of observability. So let's come back to this example of like, did did the AI recommend the right talks? Did it tag the social media post correctly? That is something we have to still do. And there's a lot of variables there, right? It's the prompt, it's the model, right? And one thing I didn't mention is like depending on the model, there's a cost, right? So in Gumloop, those are credits. So
Right.
you also have to be like, are we doing this in a cost efficient way? Right? Are we using a lower tier model or a higher tier model? And that's also going to affect your results. So, for instance, if you are extracting a domain from an email, any model, cheapest model, fine.
Right.
If you're tagging social media posts, are these people prone to sarcasm? Right? How big is your documentation? Like Gemini 2.5 will have a 2 million token window that actually makes it really, really good for reading large documentation and providing an answer. Whereas something like a GPT 4.1 or 4.0 has reasoning, right? Another trade-off is time. How quickly do you need a response? Right? If you need a response right away, a lower tier, like a simpler model, will respond faster, whereas
Right.
a reasoning model will take more time. So
Right. So,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, buddy.
No, I was going to say, so you can actually choose at any particular point in the flow, you can choose a different model based on
Absolutely.
what it is you're trying to do with that at
Yes.
that
And so
point.
this is where I think a lot of the skill is, obviously building the flows, but then being like, does this do what we wanted to do? And that switch between like, okay, we need human in the loop for all. Oh, and now we need human in the loop for 10%. Then you have to be like, am I good enough to know when the AI, like, do I have something in my workflow that gives me confidence around the output of an AI?
Right.
Right. So there are flows that, a good example might be, we have workflows, customers who have workflows of like, okay, I have this automated workflow that uses AI or not. And then they're going to sample 10, like lead qualification is a good example. Some businesses will qualify 4,000, 5,000, millions of leads a day, whatever. And then they may not have AI in that workflow. So they may take 1% or 2% of their leads and ask them the question, hey, AI, do you agree with this qualification? Right? And being able to resample that way. So that's also important for workflows where you have AI in them as well. Right? So checking, like, a skill is like, how much should a human be involved? Is definitely a skill
Right.
that's going to be, uh, um, we all have to hone over the next couple of years,
Right.
and one that frankly I'm learning as well.
Right. Right. And recognizing when a human needs to intervene. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that it can do things like social media posts, and can it actually post right out to
Yes,
those
and I think that's a
platforms?
perfect. Yeah, it can, and I think that's what a moment we're like, do we want to? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's arguably a moment where you're like, maybe not. So here's a good example, right? And this might be another conversation. Is like, I really in these workflows that I built, I like the idea of the AI recommending an answer,
Ah,
right? Like, hey, this person is having a support issue. I've gone and read the documentation. Here's what I think we should answer. So you and then you as are like, oh no, this is wrong, or no, this is right.
right.
Um, Whereas I think we can all agree that like we are someone on the internet, and AI generated responses are always a little. They're good. They can be good, but
Mm-hmm.
that might not be the moment where you want to be like trusting it 100%. But yes, it
Right.
can. To
Right.
your point.
Right. And it may also kind of sound like AI. I have a client who I noticed on LinkedIn. She'd posted something and it was like, oh, she got AI to do that. I know, because that is just, it's so
Yeah, but even
AI-ish in
in
the
the
way it was
content.
written, right?
Yeah, but even in the like we do have a lot of customers who do use content generation in a way that is, really smart. Where I'll give you an example, right? So I do live streams, we all do live streams. It's hard to find like snippets and repurpose content, or like, hey, I've just
Mm,
written a blog post. What's like the 3-line summary to this?
right.
Right? So that type of content repurposing, or hey, like, SEO loves updates, right? So you need to constantly be updating your articles.
Mhm.
If you have 400 articles, that's like a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? So maybe the AI can be like, hey, I've just read through all of your blog posts. Here's like an easy update you can make,
Right.
right? That type of work, um, it's a workflow. It's like, I need to go through these articles. I have this outcome I want,
Mhm.
right? But was just unfeasible for us. But now it's extremely feasible as the AI doing 90% of the work,
Right.
and that's a really once you start doing that type of thing, you're like, wow, there's so much we can do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Excellent. So, tell us a little bit more about pricing and all of that, sort of how to
Yeah.
get started and all that.
So Gumloop has a generous free tier, so you can play around with Gumloop. Everything we built today, you can do on the free tier. Gumloop then has a starter plan, which is like a one person in a company. Okay, it's gonna be lights out for the rest of the thing. And then I'm a yapper. This light, we need to fix it. Um, we have $97 a month on the starter. That gives you 30,000 credits. So think about, you can do, probably 30,000 flows, or depending on how many AI credits. And then once you spread to your team, that's on the pro tier, right? That's like a team working and building for a business. It's 297, I think, a month, and that gets you 10 users, 75,000 credits, and that's when you're like deploying Gumloop at scale within your company. And then obviously we have like enterprise for folks who need on like us helping them build workflows, security concerns, all that type of thing. Those are our tiers. So we're definitely more of a business tool than a consumer prosumer type tool.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Well, if we don't, anybody else have a question for Aaron on this? We're all going to check out Gumloop real soon. I think so. I think it would be really neat to figure out
Yeah,
what you can do with it.
highly recommend checking out University.
Yeah.
It does a step by step of what I built today as an example. And we also have one on social media monitoring as another example. I run cohorts every week, every
Ah,
2 weeks.
okay. Okay.
So that's like a 3 sessions a week, 2 webinars for 1 hour, and then 30 minute show and tell where folks show their workflows. And, it's my favorite part of the job because people build stuff that is really, really cool, and, share workflows and examples that I would have never thought of. And that's a really fun part of my job. And people really seem to enjoy those cohorts. And so
Yeah.
it's really a lot of fun. So encourage folks to do that. And yeah, excited to see you all build in Gumloop. And I'm here if you have any questions.
All right. Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Aron. It was wonderful to chat with you
Always,
again and learn
always
about a
happy
new
to be back.
tool.
Yeah.
Yay! Yay! So for folks that are watching next week, we have our events here in the lodge most weeks, and next week is a panel discussion. We're staying on the AI topic here about AI and tech, whether it's a trend or a transformation. And I think we all probably think it's the transformation, but what direction is it going and where's it going to go? So we're going to have a couple of folks on with us to talk about that. We have our lodge hangout as we go into the long weekend. So the May 16th, we've got a showcase coming up with a Toronto-based designer, Mark Ralph, who does very cool work. And at the end of May, we've got Tony Seats coming up to talk about something we don't know about yet. I think he's going to come up with something really cool, which we always know anything from Tony is always going to be really useful and helpful. And other than that, I'm going to say sign up on No Code North for our nocodenorth.com for our email mailing list, so you can find out all of our events that are coming up, and our events are open to everybody. So we will talk to you soon. Bye.